So let's start with the bow. And welcome everyone to New York Buddha Dharma on Zoom. Here we are. We're working our way through this syllabus tonight. We're on class number 4 of the Path of Meditation. And the readings were really about spiritual materialism. I can't remember if I put it in the email that Trungpa Rinpoche told us when he was leaving Tibet. One of his teachers, this is in 1959, handed him a book and said, "Where you're going, you will need this." And what the book was about was spiritual materialism. And of course, Trungpa Rinpoche came to the West in around 1966 or 7. He had been living in India, and he received, with the help of a person there named Frida Beatty, who was a theosophist, and she helped him get a fellowship to Oxford. It's called a Spalding Fellowship. And he and another Lama went to Oxford together. And he studied there a number of years. And during that time, they started a meditation center in Scotland, named after the great first monastery in Tibet, Samye Ling. And there were quite a lot of events. But the thing was that about that time, in the mid to late 60s, all throughout Europe, Eastern religions were coming to the West. Hinduism and Sufism and different varieties of one thing or another, Zen Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism and Taoism and all of this. And the West was kind of, people were sort of goggle-eyed about it. It was all very exotic and new. And so and it was even more so when Trungpa Rinpoche got to the United States. It was the days of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and the Beatles and the Satguru, this kid, and Rennie Davis in Chicago and Chicago 7, and becoming students of the Satguru. And I was in New York in the late 60s and doing yoga at the Integral Yoga Institute, where Swami Satchidananda held forth. Sweet man. Let me get rid of this call. And America, of course, was just full of counterculture. The Vietnam War was ramping up. And, people were, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, the leader Baba Ram Dass, were telling people to tune in and drop out, meaning take LSD or other psychedelics. And kids were just taking off. And there was a huge rebellion going on. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche giving a lecture once, and a fellow stood up and represented many people. And Rinpoche was up there smoking a cigarette with a glass of scotch in his hand. And this fellow had long hair and bell bottoms. And he said to Rinpoche during Q&A, he said, "Your body is your temple. You're defiling the temple." And this was we were up in an outdoor setting up in Allens Park, off the peak-to-peak highway at about 12,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains, 11.5 maybe. And I just realized it's telling me my internet connection is unstable, and I can improve that. That'll fix it. And we were in this place, it was a YMCA camp, actually, and it had a huge covered area, a roof with no sides, and a dirt floor, and a stage. And Rinpoche was sitting on the stage lecturing, and this fellow was standing, with all the rest of us, a few hundred people on the dirt floor. And there was a dog walking by the front of the stage. And this fellow said, your body is your temple, you're defiling the temple. And Rinpoche leaned over and he started barking at the dog. And then he looked up at this fellow and he said, the whole world is my body. Which I think many of us didn't understand at the time, but the more you do Vipassana, the kind of practice that we did, where you are getting rid of letting go of the sense of I more and more, and just coming into awareness of this wherever you are, with full of the 6 knowables, objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, rising and passing away in the present, then that statement begins to make more and more sense, that the whole world is one's body, because you're dropping the I, other orientation, which we'll be talking more about in these readings as we go along. So America was just full of what Trungpa Rinpoche called materialism. Now, what is materialism? At the beginning of the book Cutting Through, in the introduction, he talks about the 3 lords of materialism. And the word for these that he translated as lords is actually in Tibetan is lalo. I was just reading a marvelous essay by Yova, what is his name? I'm sorry. Last name is Harari. Many of you know him he wrote the book Sapiens. He also wrote another book called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And in that book, he talks about how each culture in the world regards itself as the culture from which all other cultures spring. Every culture is centered around itself, no matter which one you pick, unless maybe you pick some primitive Aboriginal culture. And even there, you get it. Yeah. And the Tibetans, the word for barbarian in Tibetan is lalo. And the full word is lalo sum, meaning 3 barbarians. Lalo sum means 3. And the reason they call these people barbarians is that anyone who isn't speaking Tibetan, you see, is just speaking gibberish. They're just saying lalo, 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 lalo. And in fact, this is the exact etymology of the word barbarian, because the Greeks felt that anyone who wasn't speaking Greek was speaking gibberish, and they were saying bar, 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 bar. And it'll amuse you that the word for barbarian, meaning non-Chinese, in Chinese, non-Han Chinese, Han is the pure Chinese. The word for non-Han Chinese, which is usually translated as barbarian, is I think that about sums it up. Is the word. So each culture regards itself as being the epicenter of all cultures. In any event, the teaching of the 3 barbarians, the 3 lords of materialism, there's the Lord of speech, the Lord of form, the Lord of speech, and the Lord of mind. Now, first of all, what is materialism? Materialism is the attempt to arrange things for my benefit. That's what it means in this context. It's a distorted version of spirituality in this case, and you can find it in any religious tradition, any. It doesn't have to be Buddhism. It can be Hinduism. It can be a theistic tradition, a non-theistic tradition. It's the attempt to use the tradition in one way or another to benefit me, and it doesn't have to be spiritual. It can be material. So material spirit, the Lord of Form, is the manipulation of the material world to achieve my benefit. So I want to get rich, maybe. Although you can flip it, and back in those days in the 60s, us hippies, the ethic was you never own more than you can fit in your VW bug. And maybe you go live in the woods and you listen to the water, of, listen to the sound of the rain dripping from the pines, very utter simplicity. And that's another form of ordering the material world to achieve some kind of idealistic or ideal state. And but the problem is, you see, that any attempt to create an ideal state, an awakened state, is obscuring what we're actually trying to do. Because what Buddhism teaches, and I think that we all find out as we tread the path, is that we human beings are fundamentally enlightened. The problem is we've lost track of it, and we've lost faith in it. We're full of self-doubt. We feel that we have to improve ourselves, when in fact, it's quite the reverse. It's really a matter of connecting back to the simplicity of who we already are. But we feel constantly that we need to improve ourselves. The Lord of Form is one example of that. I'm going to get rich, and then I'll be better. He says, it's not a matter of building up the awakened state of mind, but rather of burning out the confusions which obstruct it. And enlightenment, awakening, is permanent because it's what we already were. It's what is there. And when you lose faith in it and you struggle to achieve something, it just covers it up more. There's a famous Hindu, metaphor for this. And the story goes that the trinity of gods in Hinduism are Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. And they're sitting up in heaven, looking down on earth. And Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the sustainer, and Shiva is the destroyer. And they're looking down, and Brahma, I think it was Brahma, decides that he's going to go down to earth and just sort of walk around and see things up close hand. And he goes down to earth and he takes the form of a human being. And time passes and he forgets who he is. He thinks he's a human being after a while. And he dies and he's reborn, and he dies and he's reborn. And this goes on for a number of times. And he's reborn as a pig. So Vishnu and Shiva are up in heaven. They're looking down at him there. And Vishnu says to Shiva, Shiva, could you do something about this? So Shiva goes down to earth, pulls out his sword, slits open the pig's belly. And Brahma steps out and says, in effect, thanks, I needed that. It's good. That's an analysis, a metaphor for us, you see, what we're doing, treading the path. We're trying to sort of step out. We've become convinced that we're poor, unenlightened, confused, samsaric beings. And so we behave that way. And we've forgotten our true nature. And this path really is all about reconnecting with the true nature. And the forms of materialism are an expression of that self-doubt, because they are all driven by the feeling that we have to get something more. We have to make it better. And the more we do that, the more we cover over the natural state that's already there. So that's the Lord of Form. It's the neurotic pursuit of physical comfort, security, and pleasure. We manipulate the physical surroundings, our physical surroundings, so as to shield us from the irritations of the raw, rugged, and unpredictable aspects of life. Boy, aren't we in the middle of this now? Oh, man. Wow. We would like to control nature so that ego can secure and entertain itself, trying to avoid all irritation, and it just doesn't work. The Lord of Speech is using intellect to try to manage the phenomenal world. And we do this through subscription to philosophies, religions, ideologies, political ideologies. We might become a Democrat or a Republican. We might become a Catholic or a Buddhist or a Hindu, and you believe in something. And it provides us with identities. Now, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, or whatever I am, and rules of action and interpretations of how and why things happen as they do, these ideologies. This is the Lord of speech. And intellect itself isn't the Lord of speech. It's the use of concepts to filter and screen us from a direct perception of what is. We see the world through these ideologies and we judge it, use it, order it according to the concepts instead of seeing it raw, naked, as it is. And ego interprets anything threatening or irritating in such a way as to neutralize it or turn it into something positive from my point of view. When I was in college and graduate school, my field of study was Chinese history and language. And when I got to graduate school, I bore down and focused on the Chinese Communist Revolution. And we were in the middle of, it was 1967, 8, 9, and we were in the middle of the Cultural Revolution in China. And I thought this would be very relevant. And looking back, I think that Chinese communism may have been, and may less so today, for sure, but certainly then, the most potent form of the Lord of speech that ever walked the earth. An attempt to order human life of hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, according to a set of ideas. And these ideas, people carried them in their little red books, in their jacket pockets. They were broadcast from loudspeakers in every village. The whole society was structured according to the ideas, concepts of Chinese communism. And it's very cruel, very heartless, very lifeless. But we do it to the extent that we subscribe to ideologies and religions and sets of moralities and rules. Finally, the Lord of mind is the effort of consciousness to maintain awareness of itself. And this is done through meditation practices, wrong forms of psychotherapy, and it's using spiritual and psychological disciplines to maintain our self-consciousness of me, 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 me. And ego translates everything in terms of its own health when we're ruled by the Lord of mind. There are examples, for instance, even in Buddhism, there are some practices which aren't done much, certainly not today. They're called the dhyanas. Dhyana is a word for meditation in Sanskrit. In the Southeast Asian Buddhist tradition, they're called the jhanas. And what they are is states of concentration that are very, very, very advanced. It takes tremendous effort and application and periods of time to develop the dhyanas or the jhanas. Depending on if you're using Pali, it's jhana. And they are concentrations on, concentrations on all kinds of things. They are still definitely within samsara. We live in samsara, and we're going to be dealing with this. There are three main realms, or what are called dhatus in Sanskrit. That word is translated as realm or worlds. Often it's called the three worlds. We live in the first of these. It's called the realm or the world of desire, the kama dhatu. And within that, there are 6 subdivisions. There's the God realm, the jealous God realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the realm of the hungry ghosts, and at the bottom, the very worst, is the hell realm. Now, That's the realm of desire. Above that is called the realm of pure form. This is the first of the dhyana states. It has 4 subdivisions, and they are meditations on abstractions, pure being, for instance. Above that is the formless realm, and these are meditations on even more subtle abstractions. You might meditate on space as your object. And people who meditate in these ways achieve tremendous states of concentration. You could really call them trance states. And they're very, very pleasurable. This is sort of the paradigm of the Lord of Mind. But when you use psychotherapy or psychoanalysis or any of the psycho arts to try to achieve happiness, when you take drugs in order to try and achieve a happy state of mind, this is all the Lord of Mind. The manipulation of the mind artificially in order to achieve some kind of happiness that will only be temporary. Good psychotherapy can be very good. It absolutely can. It's just there is good and there is bad. And we won't get into that tonight. There's a lot of good psychotherapy out there, and psychoanalysis, psychoarts. Most of us, if we take a look at ourselves, we'd probably agree that we're ruled by one or more of the 3 lords, that it exerts an influence on us. Lord of form, pursuit of physical comfort, fear of poverty or whatever. Lord of speech, subscription to an ideology. I'm a Buddhist. That could be one. That's a perversion of it. And the Lord of Mind. I mean, I've had friends, who practice transcendental meditation and told me they were actually, a few even, told me able to levitate. Levitate. Right. That's pretty good. That'll take you far. So, in order to get enlightened, Rinpoche says the Buddha had to break through the elaborate defenses of the 3 lords. And we too must cut through layer by layer the elaborate defenses of these attempts to secure our well-being and come back into the realm of reality. It's really a matter of accepting the world as it is, whatever it may be. And so you certainly have a challenge that way right now. So it really is a matter of letting be. You do it every time you sit down and you just watch the breath going out into space, and it dissolves, and you just let be. The end of the out-breath, I want to talk about that for a second. This is an opportunity to achieve, you could call it that, to experience, to be in selflessness, to be in shunyata. The breath goes out. You are the breath. You see, the idea is you're letting go of the watcher. The watcher is this person who sits on your shoulder, as it were, and says, that's good, that's bad. Now you're doing it, now you're not. Now you're being successful, now you're failing. Try this, the watcher says. Do it this way. Remember what you've been told, be a good boy or a good girl and do it this way. We don't need the watcher. When you let go of the watcher, Trungpa Rinpoche called it the hitchhiker, unnecessary, just along for a ride. And when the watcher dissolves, then there is just the breath. You are the breath, you could say. And yet, there's no one to watch you being the breath. It's just the breath going out, dissolving. And at the end, when it's completely dissolved, that is a moment of emptiness. And if the watcher's there saying, ooh, that was good, well, then it's been co-opted again. And that happens a lot. That's part of the path. And then we do it again. And there's that moment of letting go. He called it giving up reference points, stepping off the cliff, floating or falling through centerless space. And about that, he said, the bad news is we're falling through centerless space. The good news is there is no bottom. This is the universe. It's infinite, and we're floating through it. So the practice of meditation is really the practice of letting be again and again. We do it on the cushion. We practice it on the cushion. We can practice it in our daily lives. And also of really seeing your thoughts. We tend to treat our thoughts as enemies. Big mistake. When we do that, we create a struggle, which obscures the natural state of mind. And not only that, it's very egotistical. It's all about me getting somewhere. Me, I'm going to be a good meditator. Really, it is about letting go into what is, whatever is right now. It's utterly relaxing. Milarepa, the great 12th century saint, yogi saint, he ate nettle soup till he turned green. He lived in a cave. And he ran out of food, so he ate nettle soup. And pictures of him are always green. And he said, I relax, I relax, I relax, and I achieve the ultimate state. When we talk about the highest Tibetan practices, which are the practices of the great perfection, there are two main practices. One of them is called cutting through to original purity. Cutting through. Cutting through what? Cutting through effort, cutting through struggle, cutting through I and other, cutting through to what is, which is pure from the beginning, original purity. And they say of that practice, that's one of the two practices, that it's utterly effortless because it's what we already are. And they call it the lazy person's path to enlightenment, that practice. And we are practicing it now as we sit and do that practice that we did this earlier on before our meditation practice, going out with the breath, dissolving, let go. Problem is that ego wants to convert everything to its own use, whatever it might be, the philosophy, the practice. He says something else in another reading that you didn't have about spiritual materialism, that it depends upon hope. All materialism depends upon hope. Hope for a better way to be. I hope tomorrow will be better than today. And he used to exhort us, please give up hope, he would say. Please give up hope. It is as bad as you think it is. Hopelessness is a prerequisite for treading the path. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes. Says, this is a good one. We should talk about this. The problem seems to be the attitude that the pain should go. Then we will be happy. Pain never goes. We will never be happy. There's a mantra for you. It's worth repeating. The pain never goes. We will never be happy. That's our mantra. Oh my God. Because the first veil, you see, that veils reality is wanting to get rid of pain. That's the veil. It's not so much that you have to have pain. You don't go seeking it, maybe, but it's the problem of trying to get rid of it. That becomes a veil in itself. He says, hope blocks your progress on the path. It's a prominent feature of spiritual materialism. All kinds of promises. Do this and you'll be able to levitate. Do that and you'll be happy. Do this and you'll win friends and influence people. They play on your weaknesses, these hopes. You get involved in looking for something other than pain. And that itself is pain. Looking for the escape from pain. He says, this is what we will go through unless we understand that the basic requirement for treading the spiritual path is hopelessness. Please give up hope, he would say. Things are as bad as you think they are. One day I was walking around in Boulder and I saw a bumper sticker that almost got it perfect, but not quite. It read, now that I've given up hope, I feel so much better. It's cute, but it was still trying to feel better. So, let's close with this. He says, during a Q&A on this chapter, a person asks a question. He says, what is required, what is necessary, is an inquisitive mind, which explores constantly curious, including yourself, your embarrassment about yourself, your insanity, your own confusion, that we could actually be interested in what's going on inside this mind, the thoughts that we churn out, those unhappy thoughts. Then once we have found our hang-ups, our hesitation, we begin to develop the project of getting rid of that pain and confusion. That's what we always do anyway. Look for all kinds of remedies. But the only and best remedy is hopelessness, which is your own product, no cost. It's not despair. If you despair, you're wallowing in hope. Despair is not it. It's hopeless, no hope. No cost. Eventually you've seen it all. Now it's time to give up hope, even give up hope of attaining enlightenment. It says at the end of that chapter. So we can have a discussion, pretty provocative material. I'm going to unmute everybody. Hold on, give me a second here. Took my glasses off too soon. And you can unmute yourself too. Why don't you just raise your hand if you want to say something.
All right. Hey, John, may I?
Hey.
You know, when I first stumbled on these teachings,
Fred.
Yeah, it's me, Fred. Hi, everybody. 2 years ago, I had a very gross form of spiritual materialism where I accidentally became a very good astrologer. And I tried to start up a business with it. And then I realized, I'm like, this isn't a way to start up a business. It's ripe for spiritual materialism. It's like, I do this to help people. And sometimes I remember I had a situation where I actually bought the book Spiritual Materialism in a bookshop I was doing psychic readings for. And I was a bad psychic because I would tell people the truth. And a lot of ladies would scream at me. And then it was like a charge by the minute thing. So they'd be out in like 10 minutes.
How much a minute?
Oh, gosh. Maybe like $1 a minute. And I would split. It would be like some form of split with the shop. But I couldn't promote myself. I'm like, this is just a bad deal all around. I'm like, and I literally grabbed spiritual materialism and I said, I'm leaving. I'm like, I'm getting called to do something else. I just made something up to get out of there. Yeah, hold on. I'm being called somewhere else. Hold on.
Okay.
John?
Ooh.
Hey, John.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Hi.
I had a question, I guess, about the hopelessness, and I always think of hope and fear as being, I describe them as being, part of the same, two sides of the same coin, right? You can't have hope without having fear, and you can't, well, can you have fear without hope? I mean, you probably could have fear without hope, but I don't know. But I always describe them as being part of the same thing. And I can't remember whether I got that from, is that a Buddhist Kabbalah kind of tenet, or am I getting that from somewhere else? I can't, I've internalized it, so I forget where that comes from.
No, they are very Buddhist. What you just said. There's a line in the Sadhana of Mahamudra. This is a text, it's a terma, meaning a revealed treasure, that Trungpa Rinpoche received in 1968 when he was on retreat at Tagtsang in Bhutan. There's a whole story about that. And a terma is a text that comes across the ages through time, unchanged. When a person receives it and writes it down, one kind of terma. And there's a famous line in there: good and bad, happy and sad, all thoughts vanish into emptiness, like the imprint of a bird in the sky. And the bandits of hope and fear have stolen my mind away. That's another line, from that sadhana. The bandits of hope and fear. So no, I mean, Buddhism is rife with that idea that hope and fear go together. They are two sides of the same coin. Yeah. And then even more, I think hope is riddled with fear. When you're hoping, you're at the same time you're afraid you're not going to get what you want. And when you're afraid, there's that automatically, it's full of it, permeated with the hope that it won't be so. Don't they go together? I mean, look at the virus pandemic right now. We hope we're not going to get infected. We're afraid we will. It's across the world.
Mm-hmm.
You literally can't have hope without fear. And I think that's something that's hard for a lot of people when they come to the path and they're told to abandon hope and fear, because everybody, we're the way we grow up in the West certainly is like, hope is the great thing. Obama ran on hope. His poster said hope, right? So it's interesting.
Yeah, sure is.
Change.
Hope is
But it seems like
when you get to Tantra, and it's essential to what he says in this chapter when he's talking about hopelessness, is that you can't get to the highest teachings, which are the tantric teachings, without giving up hope. Because hope is unreal, it has to do with fantasy. And Tantra is all about utter realism, about seeing the world as it really is. And as it really is quite beautiful when we strip away the judgments of good and bad, hope and fear. Quite magical. But we can't see it because we're always hoping it'll be otherwise, afraid that it will be what we don't want it to be. And so we see it in through those veils, projections. And then the virtue, interestingly, there's a term in the Mahayana teachings that we'll get to at some point, prajna. And prajna literally means sort of super knowing. And in the middle level of the path, what it refers to is seeing non-duality, seeing through the myth of belief in an I and belief in other, that these are fictions and not useful. When you get past that, the meaning of prajna changes, and it becomes something altogether different and even more consonant with hopelessness, with giving up hope. It becomes curiosity, inquisitiveness. In the Tantras and the highest teachings, prajna is the desire to know about and to be endlessly in love with and experiencing and exploring the cosmos. And you don't do it with hope. Hope just obscures it. It's irrelevant.
I've got a question about hope and fear. If you give up hope and like the two are inextricably linked, you're also giving up fear, right? So it's like it's a good trade.
No guarantees. I can hear him saying that. No bargains.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. It's a tricky one, right? Like is it a bargain?
It is. You said, you can wind up giving up hope and be hopeful that you'll get something out of it. Then you screwed it up again.
Wow. Was that the Lord of speech or mind right there?
I don't know. I guess that's the Lord of mind, I would think. Could be both. Yeah. I mean, back in those days, it was so obvious because you walk into every airport and the Hare Krishna people were there chanting and, handing out their stuff. And you still run into that kind of thing now and then, but not nearly like it was in the 60s. Everybody was looking for an alternative, a way out. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm really fascinated by the Lord of Materialism, the Lords of Materialism, in this situation that we're all in here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Just in the situation that we're in, how it's so, we are sort of trapped in our own spaces and in a completely different world than we're used to. We can usually have whatever we want. We usually can call or do or go wherever we want. And now we are in a place where there's no certainty, there's no ground. And of course, we all have more chance to see how we react to things, how we feel about things, why we can't. But I find I can watch my mind trying to find the ways to get the materialistic things, to get the security in this unsecure situation, finding the stories that I'm making up to make myself feel better, to not be suffering through this. And so I really liked doing the reading this week because I was connecting into how I was also using my spirituality to try and find some ground, to find something. So it was a perfect reading for me this week for this watching mind, watching form, watching speech. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're in the middle of a huge challenge. The older we get, the more real the prospect of death appears, partly because we start seeing more and more people that we know and love dying around us. And that shows us that, yeah, I'm going to die too. When you're younger, you sort of know it intellectually, but it doesn't really get into your bones. And even now, it's not total. But there are so many stories, and I know people in the Buddhist world about people who have gone into death utterly cheerful, even curious. Great teachers, ordinary people. My friend Michael Sherab Cohen, who I met in 1970, and he edited some of Trungpa Rinpoche's books, and he was an editor for the Encyclopedia Britannica before he got involved with us. And he just died. And I talked to my daughter, was there and very good friends with his daughter. They're contemporaries, close friends. And he died utterly cheerfully. His wife came in and he just looked at her and says, everything's fine. Next time she came in, it's gone. I had a friend, Denise Milani, died a number of years ago. Horrible death of cancer, just totally destroyed her body. And yet she was utterly cheerful right to the end. Amazing. And there's so many stories of, these are ordinary people, but there's stories about great teachers who could do it. Could live their life awake, cheerful. And I always tell this story about Trungpa Rinpoche saying goodbye to Suzuki Roshi when he was dying of stomach cancer. And came back from the hospital and told us all that he had done this. And we said, well, how is Roshi? And he said, he's dying like a true Buddhist. And someone asked him, what does that mean? And he said, he's curious about his own death. Curiosity, cheer. This is what we're being enjoined to do all the time. And we have this enormous challenge right now, this threat. But really, isn't it just a speeding up of what we would have encountered, many of us, most of us, at some point towards the end of our lives? A sort of a prefiguring of that?
Yeah, the element of curiosity is the one thing that allows you to deal with things. Like, I'm supposed to be seeing my 92-year-old mother next week in Canada. That's not going to happen. How do I actually get time to process it because there's nowhere to go. So I can just be curious about it rather than hoping this is all going to end and I might miss her death. I don't know. I just have to continue to be okay with things as they are. Or try.
You can do Tonglen for her, too. I'm sure you probably do. Maybe you do. It will help you.
Yeah.
You never know when you do Tonglen. Is it really helping the other person? You know, you're sort of hopeful. Sometimes you get messages back and people say, yeah, it really helped the other person. You never know. But you can watch what it does to you. It's really amazing how it has an effect, beneficial effect on the practitioner. Anybody here not know Tonglen?
Me.
You don't, Dana.
Anna, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, and you don't, Kathy. And all right, next week we will give Tonglen instruction during the meditation from 7 to 7:30. Tim.
Thank you.
So, John, isn't part of the problem an egoic identification with the body? Because I'm pretty sure that I just heard you say that the older you get and the more people that you knew die, the more you realize you're going to die. But if I understand the teachings correctly, you're not going to die, but this body will die because it's compounded. So the real reductionist materialism is when I say that I am nothing more than this body. I came into the body from nowhere and I'm going to return to the nowhere that I came from, which I think is wrong view. But I am 100% sure that this body will die. But I think the mental continuum won't. I think that's one version of ignorance, is thinking that this thing right here is me and there's no me other than this thing. Any thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I agree with what you say, with just one caveat. And that is when you get to describe what's left beside the body, that's very hard to do. The word tantra means continuity, literally. It's funny, people think tantra has to do with sexual pleasure. And there are some sexual practices, but they're kept very secret and they're not a big deal. When I went to Boulder in 1970, a condominium development had just been built called Tantra Estates. They wanted everybody to think if you moved in there, you were going to have lots of sex and alcohol, I guess. But Tantra literally means continuity. And what it's the continuity of is space. And this space is lit with knowingness. There's no knower. There's no I who knows. It's just that everything, a poor way of saying it, there was a school of Buddhism called the mind-only school that was later refuted, but they came the closest to being able to put it into words. They said that everything is self-known, Rang Rik in Tibetan, and that this space that we inhabit it's as though it were lit with knowingness. That the space is what is continuous, but the sense of I, no sense of self. That's just something that comes and goes now. Whenever we totally identify with the breath, with anything, there is no I. When you come totally present, and we all do this all the time, you forget. I is just a story. I is literally a fiction. Or as Trungpa Rinpoche once screamed at me, it is a lie, he said.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
About the not being an I? Because even when you look at the lineage from which Chögyam came from, they talk about the reincarnations of Avalokiteshvara. So that is talking about, it's almost a personality of a deity that's reincarnated in human form. How is that not an I?
We're getting into the subject of death and rebirth here. In Buddhism, we prefer to distinguish between the theistic notion of reincarnation and the non-theistic idea of rebirth. The distinction is this. Reincarnation posits that there is an eternal substance, call it a soul, an Atman, whatever you want, that migrates from one body, one incarnation to the next. The incarnations come and go, but the soul itself is unchanging. It's eternal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And eventually, if you're a Hindu, you believe it unites with the Godhead, with Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
In one
So
version.
that's the eternal. So that's like the
Hmm?
and different traditions. So it's the great. It's like the oversoul.
Yes.
Or the higher self. So there is a notion of a higher self.
In Hinduism, in Buddhism, it's just a constant process of death, birth, death, birth. This word comes out of my mouth, and there's silence, and the next word comes, and it's different. And yet, there's a kind of continuity that you can't find in the change. You can't point to it. It's like water flowing in a river. It's like dominoes going over. It's the fact that there isn't a cell in this body that was here when I was a baby, when I was a child. And yet, you can see the child and the adult and vice versa. There is a continuity, a flowingness to the change. And yet nothing endures, nothing inheres. It's just a constant flow of death and birth, and death and birth, rebirth, death and birth.
So in the Bardo teachings, there's the process of a mental continuum taking a new body, but it's a constantly changing mental continuum. So
And
it's
constantly changing body.
But the continuum is moving through time towards maybe enlightenment.
You're thinking of the continuum as though it were some kind of a solid thing, unchanging.
No, I'm thinking of it as a constantly changing thing, but like I'm experiencing the karma of past actions in the mental continuum that's constantly changing.
And the karma is changing all the time and creating new karma, like dominoes going over and changing direction, right? And you can't find any essence or substance to it. Ultimately, what they say is that you can't find anything that has any of its own existence. And there are arguments about it, and you can experience it, go at it experientially. And what they mean by existence, they call it, the term in the Buddhist thought is svabhava, meaning own being, O-W-N, being. Nothing has svabhava. And svabhava has, when it is posited, has three qualities. One is that there is endurance over time. Nothing endures over time. Nothing stays the same for even an instant. The second quality is that it's one thing. You can't find anything that's one thing. Everything is constantly changing into everything else. It's multiple, multiple, multiple. And the final characteristic of svabhava that you can never find is that anything that has svabhava is independent of anything else. Everything arises in dependence. Everything arises in a continuum in which as soon as you point to something, it's gone. Just look around our experience right now. It doesn't stay the same for even a split second. Now I'm looking at Tim. Now I'm looking at the painting on my wall. Now I'm feeling my hands here. Now I'm hearing my voice. This is the same for all of us. Continual shifting of experience, moment by moment. Any idea of continuity or of endurance is just that, an idea.
That makes sense to me, John, but if this moment of consciousness arises dependent on the previous moment of consciousness, doesn't that form a chain of change that goes back to beginningless time?
And if it goes back to beginningless time, did it actually go anywhere? If everything is infinite, you can't go, you're not going from point A to point B.
But when this body wears out, that's not the final end. And this body does wear out.
Oh, yeah. I think of the great Chinese sage Zhuangzi. He was a Taoist, 6th century. And he said, and this is before Buddhism came to China, 6th century BC, we're talking. And he said, when I die, maybe I'll be reborn as a rooster's elbow. I like that. He was a character, Zhuangzi was. It's a little after Confucius and Kunze.
I have to be on my way, everybody. It's been super wonderful to sit with you as always. Please be safe and be healthy, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Right.
Bye, Tim.
Hi.
Well, I have a question. I'm not sure if this would be considered off topic, and if it is, of course, we could talk about it another time. But my my aunt, who would have been 101, died last night.
Oh my God.
And of course, this discussion appeals to me and is very interesting to me, and I can't help but think about her as we're having it. But I wonder how you deal or how you work with people who don't subscribe to this ideology. Like when you're talking to somebody like my mom, who has always said things like, well, it's in God's hands, that, pretty much we have so little ownership over our lives as far as she's concerned. And I wonder what kind of conversation you have with people at their end of lives, or just, talking to people who are Catholic, who are Jewish. Like what does this conversation sound like when you're talking to somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with?
Well, I'm not going to go preach Buddhism at a Catholic or a Jewish funeral. It's not appropriate.
But like for somebody like my mother, like I wonder, like what, I know, and I agree with you, but for somebody who thinks that, my aunt is, was greeted by God at the gates and is now with her family, like just what do you usually offer them as a way of them grieving or just coping? I'm just curious.
Well, there are analogs in Buddhism for that idea of going to heaven. And in fact, I've performed any number of funeral ceremonies for people who have died, my parents. I performed 2 or 3 this year for people who are dying, who have died. And the ceremony is called a Sukhavati. Now, what Sukhavati means, it's a kind of heaven, if you will. Amitabha is the Buddha of compassion, and he dwells in Sukhavati. Sukhavati, Sukha means bliss. Vati is the land of, you might say, the land of bliss. And when you do this ceremony, what you're doing is you are sending the person off with the aspiration for them that they go to Sukhavati. What that really means, you can think of it in any way you want. You can imagine it as being sort of a beautiful tropical island with palm trees and, balmy weather and whatever. And, lots of wonderful food, whatever your idea of bliss might be. But what Buddhists say is, you see, when we die, the body falls away. But if we're still unenlightened, the sense of I continues on, just as it has during life, in a more like a dream state. In fact, when you dream at night, you dream about yourself as I, but you don't have a body. The whole world is absent, the material world. Death is very similar for people who are unenlightened. They enter into a purely mental place. And what you want them to do is to go to a mental place that is conducive to waking up, to achieving enlightenment. That's what Sukhavati represents. You are expressing your desire, your good wishes, your encouragement for them to relax, to have confidence and good cheer, to be cheerful, and to be reborn in a place that is very conducive to treading the path to enlightenment. So you can do this for people during their lifetime. And really, that's what great teachers do. They help us into better states of mind where we can achieve enlightenment. Trungpa Rinpoche did that for all of us. He talked about creating enlightened society, creating a society that is kind, uplifted, celebratory, full of curiosity and confidence and kindness and good cheer. And celebratory, celebrates everything, life and death. And that's really what you're wishing this person for. Now, when a person dies who's not a Buddhist, I do Buddhist practices for them. Because my best guess is maybe this will work. It makes sense to me, but it's, I don't know. I haven't been there yet. Or I have, but I don't remember. And so one of the practices you do, and I've done this for my parents and from the people that I've loved who have died, is you do Tonglen for them, that we're going to learn next week. Tonglen is called sending and taking on the medium of the breath. And after we learn it, I'll send you a marvelous poem by a Dharma brother of mine who died about a year ago and for whom I did a Sukhavati. He was Trungpa Rinpoche's earliest Western student. His name was Richard Arthur, and he was a wonderful poet. And he wrote a terrific poem about doing Tonglen called On the Medium of the Breath, the Tonglen Tango. Because what you're doing is you're breathing in the person's unhappiness, their suffering, and most of all, you're breathing in their hope and fear. And you're sending out to them confidence in what? In being able to just rest in whatever it is that you are. And you're sending out to them cheerfulness. And you do this because they're in the space between having just died and taking rebirth, according to Buddhist teachings on death and rebirth. And that can be a scary place. can be a place full of regret. You know, it's one thing to lose a limb, to lose a prized possession, to lose someone you love. But when you die, you lose the whole world. So it's a great loss, and a person can really be in shock. And so you want to send them ease, confidence, happiness, the ability to rest and feel confident and curious about what's going to happen next. So that's what Tonglen is for.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Tony,
hi.
hi. I was listening to a talk by Jack Cornfield a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he went to visit Ram Dass towards the end of his life, you know, the end of Ram Dass's life, and he went, and in his area where he was living there was a shrine, and it had a lot of different objects on there, and you know, pictures of different great spiritual teachers, both sort of Hindu and Buddhist. And right in the middle, there was a little picture of Dick Cheney. And Jack Cornfield said, I turned to Ram Dass and I said to him, what's he doing there? And he said, I'm learning to love everyone. He said, I thought it was just you know, just remarkable, really. This has been a great teaching today. I've really enjoyed listening to you. And I made a little note here about you talking about hope. And I wrote down here, hope is fundamentally about not living in the present moment. That's really what I'm taking away partly from today. And today I was also reading, and I came across a quote by Chögyam Trungpa that said, becoming awake involves seeing our confusion more clearly. And, you know, all this is just of great help. And thank you very much for your teaching today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for this terrific reminder, Tony. That's why when we meditate, we don't throw away our thoughts. You don't follow them like entertainment, but you don't try and throw them away. You can see them with curiosity, like you just said. That was wonderful. And then they become fuel for the path. They talk about this so much in the teachings. Going back to Milarepa, he encountered demons in his cave. They came to torment him, particularly a female demon named Seringma. She had eyes like saucers, huge fangs, and she bit him on the toe, and she wouldn't let go. So he preached the Dharma to her. And she said, oh, you're just trying to get rid of me. Yeah. And she wouldn't let go. And she wouldn't let go until he accepted her. And when he did, she became the goddess, Saringma, and she supported him in his practice. Same thing with our thoughts, you know. Well, everyone, let's dedicate the merit. Wow. And remember, if you're going to, keep coming, send me your email if I don't have it already, if you're not on the list, and so that I can send you things. And I'd love to send out, after we do Tonglen next week, I'll send out that Richard Arthur's poem. It's a wonderful poem, Tonglen Tango. Sometimes people get freaked out by Tonglen because you're breathing in all this bad stuff, you know. Wait till you read this poem. It won't bother you at all anymore. Okay.
John, you should mute us while we're doing the chant, because
Oh,
otherwise
thank you.
everybody's going to be all over the place.
That's right. Okay, give me a second here. Thank you for the reminder. And then I'll unmute you all again. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John.
John.
Good job.
Thanks,
One
John.
last thing, if you can, make a donation. We're doing it again, and we're going to give money to Nalanda Bodhi. And you can do it by going to New York Buddha Dharma.org. It's the website. And there's a link for donate. It's only PayPal. But we're going to get up another link where you can use, what is it?
Venmo.
Venmo's the other one.
Not Venmo, there's another one yet.
Zell.
We're going to use Zelle. But right now it's just PayPal. So if you can, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
John.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.